The Hunger Games film is a fine example of a movie that is a very proficient adaptation of the novel it is based on, but it still doesn't quite achieve what the source material did. I am not one of the people who will get angry if the film based on a book changes something or does something in a very different way. I understand that movies and books are different. What you can do in a book, you may not be able to do in a movie. Or maybe you could do it, but if you did, you would have a 3.5-hour movie. Essentially, if you are the kind of person to get upset if they don't do everything exactly as the book did, you need to understand that the film isn't the book. Even if the movie is terrible and gives the mass audiences the wrong idea of what the story is about, at the end of the day, the book remains untouched. If you don't like the movie, you can still go back and read the book. The movie isn't trying to be an exact replica of the book. If it is, then why bother making it other than to reach a wider audience who would never have read the book in the first place? The film adaptation is a perfect opportunity to change things that might not have worked as well as they could have in the book. And, of course, there's the big reason why something like this would be made, other than to make truckloads of money. And that reason is, as I stated, to get people interested in the story it is based on. While the novel The Hunger Games and its two sequels were fairly well known before the film came out, I know there were people who had no interest in those stories until seeing this movie. And speaking of movies taking quite a few liberties with the source material, I want to make sure before I go any further that I state that the Hunger Games film is not nearly as bad as it could have been. I remember hearing people complain that the movie got quite a few things wrong, and after seeing the film, I have to say I don't really feel that. This isn't in any way as bad as some of the Harry Potter movies, which dropped entire plot points just to fit everything into a reasonably short movie. This is, for the most part, a movie that does a very adequate job of adapting the book into a movie that is a watchable length and not, 3 or 4 hours long. So keeping this in mind, what did I think of the film? I should mention that several times while watching the movie, I said out loud, "Hey, that's different," and most of the time, it wasn't really a complaint. I was just somewhat intrigued that some of the things in the film weren't necessarily better, but were just different than how they transpired in the book. But what I noticed the most about the film is how it really is a different medium than the book. In a book that is over 300 pages long, you have the luxury of going into excruciatingly long detail about how it took Katniss 2 days to find water, or how long the planning and execution of her attack on the careers with Rue was. But in a movie, even one that is 2 hours and 20 minutes long, you quickly realize that those events don't have the same impact that they did in the book. While it took Katniss 2 days to find the water in the book, it takes her 2 minutes to find it in the movie. Sure, it might have taken her hours, but we instantly go from her grabbing the backpack to finding a stream. We don't suffer as Katniss suffers while she is dehydrating. We don't get to come to know Rue as a surrogate sister for Katniss because she dies 3 minutes after forming an alliance with Katniss. The devil of it is, the movie does a pretty good job of copying the plot of the book and putting it on screen, as I said earlier. Sure, there are some things in the movie we didn't get in the book, like getting to see the game makers outside of the dome and getting to see Haymitch or Gale watching the games from relative safety. But there really aren't any elements in the book that didn't get to make it into the movie, with at least one exception. But even when the movie is able to do the same plot beat for beat, I still feel like it suffers because of time constraints. No matter how faithful the movie is, it cannot spend the amount of time with Rue forming a bond with Katniss as the book does, and so forth. This is what really struck me the most about watching the movie. It does a fine job communicating most of the overall plot, but because of time limits, we don't get to see some of the minutiae that is important. We don't get to see Katniss struggling over whether Peeta is telling the truth or not about his crush on her. We don't get to see her strife when she kills the boy who killed Rue, or when Thresh is announced as dead. We technically get to see the flashback where Peeta throws the loaves of bread to Katniss, but unless you've read the book, you don't really know that Katniss was on the brink of starvation and had been trying to provide food for her mother and sister when Peeta did this. This wasn't really a problem for me, since I have already read the book. But anyone who didn't read the book, were they confused by the flashback? Did we get an adequate explanation about how the people in the capital really don't like the people in the districts, and that's why the Hunger Games take place? We know that President Snow seems to hate the people in the districts, but we can't be certain if this is a societal hatred like it seemed to be hinted at in the book. Overall, I don't have very much more to say about this film. I feel like it did maybe as good of a job as could possibly have been done with this story, but it did have some exceptional problems that I really think I only noticed because I read the book. I doubt I would have had these problems if I had come into the movie cold. I think the movie looks extraordinary. It does a really good job of capturing the filth of District 12 and then the majesty of the capital. Overall, if for some reason you're still listening to this review and you haven't seen the movie, I would say you should go do so, but also go ahead and read the book, so that you have some supplemental story and you get more of the grand scope of the story that just isn't captured by the movie.